You're just a maid. Remember your place." Those were the words that froze the room before anyone understood they had just revealed their own cruelty. Amelia Carter stood beneath the golden glow of the Valentino mansion's crystal chandeliers, holding a silver tray with both hands as laughter moved through the elegant dining hall like a cold wind. She had spent months learning how to disappear. She knew which doors to open, which conversations to ignore, and which corners of the mansion allowed her to finish her work without becoming a topic of discussion. But tonight was different. Tonight, the guests had decided she was entertainment. The mansion looked like something from another world, with polished marble floors, towering windows overlooking the city skyline, and tables decorated with flowers that probably cost more than her monthly paycheck. Men in tailored suits and women wearing designer gowns filled the room, celebrating another successful evening for the Valentino family. And in the middle of all that wealth stood Amelia, wearing a simple black uniform and carrying a tray no one seemed to notice until they wanted someone to look down on. Victoria Sinclair, the woman everyone expected to become Adrian Valentino's wife, glanced at Amelia with a faint smile. "I still can't believe Mr. Valentino allows staff to walk around during private events," she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. A few guests exchanged amused looks. Amelia lowered her eyes, not because she was ashamed, but because she had learned that dignity sometimes meant refusing to give someone the reaction they wanted. "I'm sorry if I interrupted, ma'am," Amelia said quietly. Her voice was calm. Too calm for people who wanted to see her break. Victoria stepped closer and looked at the tray in Amelia's hands. "Do you even understand what you're serving? Some of these people have spent more on one dinner than you'll make this year." The words landed harder than the insult itself. Not because Amelia believed them, but because she recognized the kind of person who measured human worth by a bank account. She had met people like that before. People who saw a uniform before they saw a person. Amelia simply placed the tray on the table and began to walk away. Then one guest laughed. "She really thinks she belongs here." The room grew quieter. Amelia stopped for half a second. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her tray, but she did not turn around. She had survived difficult years by remembering one thing: someone else's opinion could never decide her value. What none of them knew was that Adrian Valentino had been standing near the staircase the entire time. The most powerful man in the room had not missed a single word. He had watched the guests judge Amelia by her clothes, her job, and her silence. But he had also watched something they ignored. He had seen her help an elderly employee carry boxes earlier that morning. He had seen her stay late to comfort a frightened new worker. He had seen the kindness she showed when nobody important was watching. And now, as the room waited for Amelia to disappear quietly, Adrian Valentino stepped forward. The sound of his footsteps across the marble floor was enough to make every conversation stop. Amelia turned slowly, unaware that the woman they had mocked as invisible was about to become the only person in the room anyone would remember. Adrian Valentino did not raise his voice. He did not need to. In a room filled with people who were used to being heard, his silence carried more weight than anyone expected. Amelia Carter stood still near the edge of the dining hall, unsure why the man everyone feared was now walking toward her. For months, she had learned the rules of the Valentino mansion. Keep your head down. Finish your work. Never become part of the world that existed beyond the staff doors. Adrian Valentino lived in that world. A world of private meetings, powerful names, and decisions that affected people far beyond the walls of his home. Amelia had never wanted to be noticed by him. Being invisible had always felt safer. But Adrian had noticed more than she realized. He had noticed the small things. The things people with money and status never bothered to see. 3 months earlier, Amelia had arrived at the Valentino estate carrying one suitcase, a worn resume, and the quiet determination of someone who had already survived more than most people knew. The mansion had seemed impossible at first. The driveway stretched nearly half a mile from the gates to the front entrance. The ceilings were higher than any apartment she had ever lived in. The paintings on the walls looked like they belonged in museums. But Amelia did not come there to admire luxury. She came there because her mother needed medication, because bills did not disappear simply because life became difficult, and because pride did not pay for groceries. Before becoming a maid, Amelia had been a classroom assistant at a small elementary school in Chicago. She loved working with children. She loved seeing the moment when someone finally understood something they had struggled with. But when her mother became ill, Amelia made a choice that many people never saw. She gave up her own plans to take care of the person who had sacrificed everything for her. The world saw a maid. They never saw the woman who had spent years putting everyone else first. Inside the Valentino mansion, Amelia rarely spoke about herself. She listened more than she talked. She remembered birthdays of employees nobody else noticed. She quietly replaced a broken coat button for the elderly gardener during winter. She left warm meals for the security staff who worked long nights. She did these things without expecting praise because kindness was not something she performed. It was simply who she was. That was what Adrian Valentino had discovered. While others judged Amelia by her uniform, he had been watching her character. He remembered the afternoon he saw her sitting beside one of the older employees in the kitchen, patiently listening as the man talked about his late wife. She had no reason to stay after her shift ended, yet she stayed anyway. Adrian had built his entire life around recognizing intentions. He knew when people wanted something from him. He knew when compliments were fake and when smiles were carefully planned. But Amelia never asked for anything. She never tried to impress him. She never treated him differently because of his name. And that was something he could not ignore. As Adrian reached the center of the room, every guest turned their attention toward him. Victoria smiled confidently, expecting him to agree with her. She had no idea that Adrian had already made his decision long before he spoke. Because the person everyone in the room had dismissed was the one person who had shown genuine respect when nobody was watching. And for the first time that evening, the guests were about to learn that silence did not mean weakness. The room had changed. Moments earlier, Amelia Carter had been standing alone beneath the crystal lights, surrounded by people who saw her as someone who did not belong. Now every person in the dining hall was watching Adrian Valentino, waiting for the words that would decide what happened next. Adrian stopped a few feet away from Amelia. His expression remained calm, but there was something different in his eyes. It was not anger. It was certainty. "Amelia," he said quietly. Hearing her name from him surprised her. She had expected criticism. She had expected a reminder that she had crossed a line by becoming the center of attention. Instead, he spoke to her as if she was a person who deserved to be heard. "Yes, Mr. Valentino," she replied softly. Victoria Sinclair looked between them, confused by the tone of his voice. "Adrian, I think this has been misunderstood," she said with a polite smile. "No one meant anything serious. We were simply making conversation." Adrian turned his attention toward her. Conversation does not require humiliation. The words were simple, but they changed the atmosphere instantly. The guests who had laughed moments earlier lowered their eyes. Some looked uncomfortable. Others suddenly became very interested in the details of their dinner plates. Amelia remained quiet, still holding onto the tray she had carried through the room. She did not want attention. She did not want anyone defending her, because they felt sorry for her. That was something Adrian noticed immediately. "You are not going to say anything?" he asked. Amelia looked at him for a moment. "I do not think my words would change their opinions, sir." Her answer surprised him. Not because it was bitter, because it was peaceful. She was not trying to win. She was simply accepting that some people chose not to understand. Adrian studied her carefully. In his world, people usually fought for recognition. They demanded respect. They searched for opportunities to stand closer to power. Amelia had done the opposite. She had spent months in his home without asking for favors, without using his name, and without trying to gain anything from him. Victoria gave a small laugh, hoping to break the tension. "Adrian, you cannot seriously be taking this personally. She is an employee. There are different roles for different people." The sentence hung in the air. Adrian looked around the room. He saw the expensive suits, the perfect smiles, the people who had everything but still found satisfaction in making someone else feel small. Then he looked back at Amelia. A person's role does not determine their worth. Nobody answered. The silence became heavier. Amelia felt uncomfortable with the attention, so she lowered her voice. Mr. Valentino, I should return to work. She turned slightly, ready to leave the room and let the moment pass. But Adrian stopped her.
Wait. She paused.
You did nothing wrong. Those 4 words affected her more than she expected. Because for years, Amelia had become used to explaining herself. She had become used to proving that her choices were reasonable, that her sacrifices mattered, that she was more than what people assumed. But she rarely heard someone simply acknowledge that she deserved respect. Adrian then faced the guests again. Before anyone in this room judges another person, they should understand something. Respect is not given because of money, family name, or social position. It is shown through actions. The room remained silent. Victoria's expression changed as she realized Adrian was not defending Amelia because of obligation. He was defending her because he genuinely respected her. And that realization unsettled everyone more than anger ever could. Because the person they had ignored all evening was now the person who had revealed the character of everyone else in the room. The dining hall remained quiet after Adrian Valentino's words, but the silence was not empty anymore. It was filled with something unfamiliar to the guests who had gathered there. Reflection. For the first time that evening, they were not looking at Amelia Carter as a servant standing in the corner. They were looking at her as a person. Amelia lowered her eyes, unsure how to respond. She had spent so much time avoiding attention that being defended in front of everyone felt almost uncomfortable. She did not know what to do with kindness when it arrived so publicly. You do not have to defend me, Mr. Valentino, she said softly when the guests began to move away from the conversation. Adrian looked at her with a slight expression of surprise. Why would you say that? Amelia glanced around the room. Because I am used to people making their own decisions about me. Some people will always see what they want to see. Her voice was calm, but behind those words was a lifetime of experience. Adrian noticed that she was not asking for sympathy. She was simply stating a truth she had learned long ago. That was what stayed with him. Many people around him spent their lives trying to appear important. Amelia spent hers quietly doing things that mattered. Later that evening, after the guests had returned to their conversations and the mansion had grown quieter, Adrian stood alone in his study. The room was exactly how it always was. Dark wood shelves, a large desk, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. Everything represented control and success. But his thoughts were not on business. They were on Amelia. He remembered the first day she arrived at the estate. She had walked through the front doors carrying a small bag, wearing a simple coat, and looking around with the careful attention of someone entering a place where she knew she did not belong. Most new employees tried to impress him. They spoke carefully around him. They wanted him to remember their names. Amelia had simply introduced herself, thanked the staff manager, and started working. She never treated his wealth as something magical. She never acted afraid because of his reputation. She simply treated him like another person. That memory stayed with him. Adrian had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Opportunities, connections, approval. But Amelia had offered something rare. Genuine respect without expectation. Meanwhile, in the staff kitchen, Amelia quietly cleaned the remaining dishes from the evening. Sarah, one of the older employees, watched her for a moment. You know, most people would have been angry after what happened tonight. Amelia smiled gently. Being angry would not change who they are. Sarah shook her head. I do not know how you stay so calm. Amelia looked down at the folded napkin in her hands. My mother taught me something when I was young. She said that people can take many things from you, but you should never let them take the person you choose to be. Those words reached Adrian, who had entered the hallway without her noticing. He stopped for a moment. He had heard every word, and something inside him shifted. Because Amelia Carter was not strong because she had never been hurt by the world. She was strong because the world had given her every reason to become bitter, yet she had chosen kindness instead. Adrian walked away quietly, but for the first time in years, the man everyone knew as untouchable found himself questioning something he had never questioned before. Maybe true power was not about making people respect you. Maybe it was about recognizing the people who deserved respect all along. The next morning, the Valentino mansion felt different. Nothing had changed about the grand entrance, the marble floors, or the carefully arranged rooms filled with expensive furniture. Yet somehow, the atmosphere had shifted. The people who worked there had heard about what happened at dinner. They had heard that Adrian Valentino, a man known for his quiet authority, had stood up for Amelia Carter in front of his own guests. But Amelia did not act differently. She arrived at work at the same time. She followed the same routine. She greeted everyone with the same kindness she had shown before. She did not walk through the mansion expecting special treatment. She did not use Adrian's words as a reason to look down on anyone else. That was the part Adrian found most unusual. From his office window, he watched her cross the courtyard carrying a small stack of folded linens. She stopped when she noticed one of the younger employees struggling with a task and immediately offered to help. She had no audience. No guests were watching. No one important was there to praise her. She helped because that was simply who she was. Adrian leaned back in his chair, thinking about how rare that had become. Later that afternoon, he called Amelia to his office. When she entered, she paused near the doorway as she always did. She never assumed she was welcome in rooms like this. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Valentino?" she asked. Adrian looked up from his desk.
Yes.
"I wanted to ask you something." Amelia waited quietly. "Why did you stay silent last night?" The question caught her off guard. She looked down for a moment before answering. "Because I knew reacting would not make them understand me." Adrian studied her expression. "And that does not bother you?" Amelia gave a small, thoughtful smile. "Of course it does. I am human. But I have learned that some people only see what they expect to see. If I spend all my energy trying to change every opinion, I will never have enough left to live my own life." Her answer stayed with him. Adrian had spent years surrounded by people who fought for attention, approval, and influence. Amelia had somehow built a life around something completely different.
Peace.
"You are different from everyone I know," Adrian said. Amelia looked slightly uncomfortable. "I do not think I am." "You are," he replied. "You just do not realize it." Before Amelia could respond, a message arrived on Adrian's phone. It was an update about an upcoming charity event hosted by the Valentino Foundation. The event was designed to support local families struggling with education and healthcare costs. Adrian had attended these events every year, but they had always felt like formal obligations. Names on a guest list, handshakes, photographs, numbers on reports. But suddenly, he remembered Amelia's story, the choices she had made, the sacrifices she had carried quietly. He realized the foundation was supposed to help people like her, people who worked hard but rarely received recognition. "Amelia," he said, looking back at her, "have you ever considered doing something beyond your current position?" She looked surprised. "Beyond being a maid?" Adrian nodded. "Beyond what people assume you are capable of." For the first time, Amelia did not immediately know what to say. She had spent so long accepting the limits others placed around her that the idea of something more felt unfamiliar. Adrian saw the hesitation in her eyes. He understood then that the greatest obstacle was not the opinions of the guests from the night before. It was the invisible walls Amelia had built after years of being underestimated. And as she stood there quietly in his office, Adrian made a decision. He was not going to change her into someone else. He was going to make sure the world finally had a chance to see who she already was. The days that followed were unlike anything Amelia Carter had expected. She thought Adrian Valentino's offer would be a simple conversation, a kind gesture that would eventually disappear like many others had before. But Adrian was not the type of person to make promises without meaning behind them. He had spent years building his reputation around careful decisions, and now he was making one of the most unexpected decisions of his life. He wanted Amelia to help with the Valentino Foundation's upcoming community event. Not as a maid. Not as someone working quietly behind the scenes. He wanted her perspective. At first, Amelia believed there had been a misunderstanding. "Mr. Valentino, I appreciate your confidence in me, but I do not have experience with something like this." Adrian looked at the documents on his desk before looking back at her. That is exactly why I asked you. She was confused. I do not understand. Adrian folded his hands calmly. Everyone involved in this project knows how to create impressive presentations. They know how to make a room look perfect. They know how to speak the language of donors and executives. But very few people know what it feels like to need the help they are offering. Those words stayed with Amelia, because she understood that feeling.
She
Understood the families who worried about medical expenses. She understood the parents who wanted better opportunities for their children but struggled to find them. She understood the quiet sacrifices people made every day without anyone noticing. Still, she hesitated. For years, Amelia had trained herself not to expect opportunities. Hope was something she treated carefully because disappointment was easier to handle when she never reached too far. Adrian noticed her hesitation. Amelia, I am not asking you to become someone else. His voice softened. I am asking you to stop believing that your experiences have no value. Those words reached a place inside her that she rarely allowed anyone to see. The next week became a new chapter inside the Valentino mansion. Amelia sat in meetings she never imagined attending. At first, she remained quiet, taking notes while executives discussed plans and budgets. But slowly, people began asking for her opinion. They noticed something different about her ideas. She did not focus only on appearances. She focused on people. She asked questions others had forgotten to ask. Would families be comfortable arriving at the event? Would children feel welcomed? Would elderly guests feel included? Simple questions, but important ones. Adrian watched as the same woman who had once stood silently in a dining room full of judgment began changing conversations without ever raising her voice. She did not demand attention. She earned it. Meanwhile, some members of Adrian's social circle struggled with the change. They could not understand why he valued Amelia's opinion. They believed success came from titles, connections, and status. But Adrian was beginning to see something they could not. True insight did not always come from the people sitting at the highest tables. Sometimes it came from the person who had spent years listening from the edges. One evening, as Amelia reviewed plans for the foundation event, Adrian walked past her office and stopped. The light from the desk lamp reflected across the papers in front of her. She looked focused, determined, and completely different from the woman who had wanted to disappear in the dining hall. Adrian realized something important. He had not given Amelia a chance to prove herself. He had simply created a space where she could finally show what had always been there. And for the first time in a long while, Amelia began to wonder if the world she had been quietly serving was finally ready to see her. The Valentino Foundation event was only 3 days away, and the entire mansion had become a place of preparation. Boxes arrived every morning. Staff members moved carefully through the halls. Meetings continued from early morning until evening. But the biggest change was not happening inside the building. It was happening in the way people looked at Amelia Carter. A few weeks earlier, she had been the woman many guests ignored. The maid who carried trays. The person they believed belonged in the background. Now, those same people were beginning to notice that every decision she made had a purpose. She was not trying to impress anyone. She was simply bringing a perspective that others had forgotten. But not everyone welcomed that change. Victoria Sinclair had watched quietly as Amelia gained respect inside the Valentino organization. She had watched executives listen to her ideas. She had watched Adrian Valentino trust her judgment. And for someone who had always believed status determined importance, that was difficult to accept. During a planning meeting in the mansion's conference room, Victoria looked over the event proposal prepared by Amelia. The room was filled with executives, advisors, and members of the foundation team. "This is thoughtful," Victoria said with a polite smile. "But perhaps a little too emotional. A foundation needs strategy, not just feelings." The room became quiet. Amelia looked at the documents in front of her. She understood the criticism was not really about the proposal.
It was about where the idea came from.
"I understand your concern," Amelia replied calmly. "But strategy without understanding the people we want to help can create distance instead of connection." Some people around the table looked surprised. Months ago, Amelia would have stayed silent. But she had learned something important. Having a voice did not mean speaking the loudest. It meant knowing when something needed to be said. Adrian sat at the end of the table, listening carefully. He did not interrupt. He wanted everyone to see what he had already seen. Amelia did not need him to speak for her. She was capable of standing on her own. Victoria leaned back slightly. You seem very confident for someone who has never managed a project like this before. The comment was subtle, but everyone understood the message behind it. Amelia took a slow breath. You are right. I have not managed an event of this size before. She paused. But I have spent years understanding the people this foundation was created to support. Her answer was simple, honest, and impossible to dismiss. Adrian looked around the room. He saw the moment everyone understood the difference. Experience mattered. Education mattered. But compassion and understanding mattered too. After the meeting ended, Adrian walked with Amelia through the quiet hallway. Sunlight entered through the tall windows, creating long patterns across the marble floor. You handled yourself well, he said. Amelia smiled slightly. I almost lost my confidence. Adrian looked at her. But you did not. She thought about that for a moment. Maybe because I finally realized I was not there to prove I belonged. Adrian waited for her to continue. I was there because I had something valuable to offer. Those words stayed with him, because that was exactly what he had been trying to show her. The world had convinced Amelia that she needed permission to be seen, but she was beginning to understand that dignity was never something someone else could grant. It was something she carried with her all along. And as the foundation event approached, Adrian knew the biggest transformation was no longer happening around Amelia. It was happening within her. The day of the Valentino Foundation event arrived with a quiet sense of anticipation. The grand ballroom of the Valentino estate had been transformed into a place of warmth rather than just elegance. The usual signs of wealth were still there, the polished marble floors, the tall windows, the carefully arranged decorations, but something felt different. This time, the purpose was not to impress powerful guests. It was to welcome ordinary families who had spent years feeling unseen. Amelia Carter stood near the entrance, watching people arrive. Parents walked in holding their children's hands. Older guests looked around with curiosity and surprise. Many of them had never stepped into a place like this before. Amelia noticed their hesitation immediately because she understood it. She knew what it felt like to enter a room and wonder if you belonged. So she greeted them personally. She remembered names. She asked questions. She made people feel comfortable before they ever needed to ask for help. Across the room, Adrian Valentino watched quietly. He had attended countless events like this before. He had seen speeches, presentations, and carefully prepared moments designed for public approval. But this was different. Amelia had changed the entire atmosphere without demanding attention. She had created something money alone could never buy.
Trust.
As the event continued, several foundation members approached Adrian. They congratulated him on the success of the evening, but many of their compliments focused on Amelia. They admitted they had underestimated her. They had assumed someone without a traditional executive background could not contribute to a major project. But they had been wrong. Amelia had shown them that understanding people was not something written on a resume. It was something built through experience. Later that evening, Adrian stepped onto the stage to address the guests. The room became quiet as everyone turned toward him. Usually, Adrian was known for brief speeches. He preferred actions over words. But tonight, he wanted to recognize someone who deserved to be seen. When we started planning this event, Adrian began, we believed we were creating an opportunity for people in our community. But during this process, we learned something important. Sometimes the person who changes the way we see the world is someone we almost overlooked. The audience listened carefully. Amelia stood among the staff members, unaware of what was coming next. Amelia Carter reminded us that compassion is not a position. It is not a title. It is not something that belongs only to people with influence. It is a choice we make every day. For a moment, Amelia could not move. She had spent years believing her work was valuable only when it helped someone else quietly. She had never expected recognition. She had never searched for applause. Yet now, Standing in a room filled with people who finally saw her, she felt something she had almost forgotten: acceptance. After the event ended, Amelia stepped outside onto the quiet terrace overlooking the city. The evening air was peaceful, and the lights below reflected across the streets. Adrian joined her a few moments later. "You did well today," he said. Amelia smiled. "Everyone did well today." Adrian shook his head slightly.
No.
"Everyone participated. But you changed the way they looked at the people they were trying to help." Amelia looked out at the city. "I only shared what I knew." Adrian smiled softly. "That is exactly why it mattered." For the first time, Amelia understood that being recognized did not mean she had changed into someone different. She was still the same person who cared, listened, and helped when nobody was watching. The only difference was that now others could finally see what had always been there. Months passed after the Foundation event, but the moment that changed everything remained in the minds of those who had witnessed it. The people who once looked past Amelia Carter now greeted her with respect. The employees who had only known her as a quiet maid now understood the heart behind the person they had overlooked for so long. Yet Amelia never changed the way she treated others. She still arrived early. She still listened carefully. She still helped people without expecting recognition. The difference was that now the world around her had finally learned to see what had always been there. Inside the Valentino mansion, the halls that once felt like a place where she had to disappear became a place where her presence mattered. Adrian Valentino noticed that change more than anyone. He had spent years believing that leadership meant having all the answers. He believed strength came from control, from making decisions quickly, from never showing uncertainty. But Amelia had shown him another kind of strength: the strength to listen, the strength to understand, the strength to recognize value before the world approved of it. One afternoon, Adrian found Amelia in the garden, organizing notes for another community project. The sunlight reflected softly across the flowers, and for a moment, the peaceful scene felt completely different from the world Adrian was used to. "You're still working on new ideas," he said. Amelia looked up and smiled. "There is always someone who needs help." Adrian looked at the pages in her hands. "Do you ever think about how different things are now?" Amelia paused. She looked toward the mansion, remembering the night when she had stood inside the dining hall feeling invisible. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I do not think the world changed overnight." Adrian waited for her answer. "I think people changed when they decided to look closer." Her words stayed with him, because she was right. The problem had never been that Amelia lacked value. The problem was that people were too quick to judge what they did not understand. Later that year, the Valentino Foundation expanded its programs, and Amelia became one of the people leading new community initiatives. She never forgot where she came from. She never forgot the people who worked quietly behind the scenes. She made sure their voices were included because she knew what it felt like to be present but unseen. Victoria Sinclair eventually left the Valentino social circle after realizing that admiration built on status could disappear quickly. The people who once laughed with her became distant when they understood the difference between confidence and kindness. Adrian never mentioned that night again.
He did not need to.
The lesson had already been learned. One evening, as the city lights filled the skyline, Adrian and Amelia stood outside the mansion. There were no guests watching. No audience waiting for a powerful statement. Just two people who had learned something important from each other. "You know," Adrian said, "when you first came here you thought this place was too big for you." Amelia smiled. "It was." Adrian looked at her. "And now?" She looked back at the mansion, then at the city beyond it. "Now I know the size of a room does not decide whether someone belongs there." Adrian smiled because he understood exactly what she meant. True worth had never been measured by wealth, titles, or appearances. It had always been found in character, compassion, and the way someone treated others when nobody was watching. And that day, the world remembered something it had almost forgotten. A person's dignity is not given by the powerful. It is carried by the person who never lets anyone take it away.